We're going to start off with an altered book. This is a book that I bought for the invention convention. We usually have a table set up where the kids and their families wait while the judging takes place. And so it's not really a book that I would put in our classroom library. It was a book bought for a special purpose. The purpose is no longer there. So when I was looking through my house, though, I realized, wow, this book, which has nothing necessarily to do about school, or has nothing to do with school, really did express our year, though. We ended up with 14 sixth graders getting either flu A, flu B, bronchitis, or strep. And so we had a huge amount of kids sick with respiratory issues this year. And then the whole coronavirus, which has interrupted our school year or changed our school year, is also an upper respiratory thing. So I thought, wow, that actually does fit my topic. And so the first step of this is you look through the book and you see if there are any pages that are okay the way they are. This is pretty boring. I could use it that way or cover it. The table of contents, I definitely want to cover. They're not attractive pages. It's not going to be easy to put my poetry over top of it. This I like. It reminds me of you guys. A lot of you are in band, and so I want to keep that. This I'm not sure about. I'm not sure about these. We'll see. The food, depending on what your topic is, it might be a good page to save, but not really if you're talking about school. I like the picture with the gym, the kids playing, so that would be a nice one. Nose and throat, these are not the greatest pictures. But this is the first step, is you just go through and you look, are there any pictures of the book that you really want to keep? That's another one, kids in the cafeteria. And since mine is about school, that would be a nice one to keep in the book. I'm not sure about the one with the milk carton. That might be a keeper as well. I don't really like that one with the larynx. It doesn't fit school as much. A lot of these, oh my goodness, always cover your mouth when you cough. It stops the spread of germs. That would be a page I would keep, because we're constantly telling you to cover your cough, cover your sneeze. So then the next step, after you've decided what you're going to keep and what you're going to get rid of, is finding materials that coordinate with your theme, your book, your cover. I don't have a lot of my fancy papers at home, but what I did discover is that when we were planning to wallpaper the living room, which we ended up not doing after all, I got some samples of wallpaper and I had them hanging. And then when we were trying to decide wallpaper, no wallpaper, I kind of just put them away in my craft room. But these would be really nice papers to cover up any pages that I didn't like. The coloring of the sample actually matches the color palette of the book. If I wanted a little more pop of color but still in that same muted palette, I could use the green. So even though I don't have everything I really need and really want for this project, I do have some things that I could put to use. To glue in your pages, I recommend Aleene's Tacky Glue or Elmer's White Glue, slightly diluted. Slightly, here, where is the picture? Right there, slightly diluted. And we're going to apply it with a paintbrush. The problem with using it straight from the container is it will make your paper super lumpy and bumpy if you use too much. So I'm going to be very careful and just glue down, and you'll notice I'm not using a lot of glue. I'm really not. I'm putting it very thinly because, like I said, if you put thick glue on there, it's going to make your pages all bumpy and wobbly, and it's not going to work very well. So we would spread it on with a brush. This is kind of a shiny page, so it's not really going to hold on all that well at first, but you're going to have to let it dry for a while. So I'm going to start out my book with the beige paper. I'm going to put it on the page so that I'm using the paper wisely. You'll notice it's glued down here. Oops, let's get it in the camera. It's glued down here, but all this extra I'll be able to use somewhere else. So then I'm going to just turn the page. Make sure it is seated properly, hold it down, and then I might go to the next page. But I'm going to wait because it's going to make it a little bit easier to cut. So I'll show you. So I'm going to do this first page, and the next page I do is not going to be this one, it's going to be this one. And again, you're brushing on the glue. You're brushing it on enough that it'll stick, but not so much that you're going to make your paper glumpy and all wobbly, because you know what happens when you use too much glue. It gets all lumpy. So we're going to cover this page with glue. I'm going to go with the green next, and I'm not trimming anything right now. I'm not going to trim a thing. I'm going to let it hang over like that because I'm going to trim when it's dry. And so again, I fit it right into the edge, make sure it covers the whole page, smooth it out, really get it in there. I'm going to stop the camera momentarily and speed it up through a bunch of more pages, but for now I am just going to close the book and give it a little bit of dry time. And then the next thing I do is show you how to trim the pages, and then I'll add a bunch more pages, show you how to trim more pages. Now that the book has had a little time to dry, I'm going to trim the first 2 pages I did. And the way I would do that is flip it over so you have the outline of the page to follow. And just with a pair of scissors, you're going to cut. If you go a little bit over, it's not a problem, but try to follow the page so the page size in the book will be the same. I'm going to be very careful when I'm trimming that I don't waste the paper, because I'm going to need this paper for other things in the book. So I'm going to just be very, very careful as I'm trimming that I don't rip, in this case, the wallpaper. I'm just going to trim it back. Get it right down to the book. And so I'm saving this giant piece of paper, and I have now a page in the book that is much readier to put my poetry on than the one that was written. And I'll show you again with the next page, the second page that I did, and I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to follow along the page of the actual book with my scissors. And see on the bottom here, I'm going to need to do a little trimming on the bottom because it wasn't as straight as I would have liked it to be, but it's okay. You just go in with any pair of scissors and carefully trim it. You're going to turn the book to make it easier to cut. Once again, you're going to bring it all the way back to the spine of the book. Carefully, slowly, so that the book now has this beautiful canvas to put your poetry on. This one, like I said, is a little bit crooked, so I'm going to go back with my scissors and I'm going to trim the bottom. I want the page I've created with the fancy paper to be the same size as the original page in the book. And so the next step is just to continue through and cover all the pages I don't want with some type of paper that is more attractive and will make my book a better place to display my poetry. While you're letting your book dry, after you've put the fancy papers on, and you really can't do anything else, before you clean up, it's a great time to make these little frames. They make the poem pop off the page a little bit better. And while you have the scraps and leftovers, it's the perfect opportunity to make the little frames. So what I've done is I've taken a little strip of the lighter color and I've put it across the top of the beige. Now I'm not sure what size my pocket's going to be, but I'm just going to create this and put it aside and let it dry. I had another scrap of a book that I used to cover a page, and then I used one of my paint strips for the paint chip poetry to put a little frame on it. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them and how I'm going to put them in the book, but now while I have all these little scraps, it's the perfect time to fix them. These are just two rectangles that could be frames by themselves. They could be frames with an extra strip at the top. Usually when you've done a piece of poetry, and you cut it out, it usually fits nicely on something that's about 3 by 5. So all these little scraps that are about 3 by 5, you're just going to cut into rectangles and save them. Bigger scraps, I put a little edging on with one of the little tiny scraps that I couldn't do anything else with, and that could become 2 pockets. I probably wouldn't put a pocket that big in the book, but it could become 2. So all these little bits and pieces, before you decide to get rid of them, make sure that there's nothing else you can do with them. And you'll end up with a lot, and it may be that I don't actually need these, but a lot of them are pretty, and they could easily be glued to the top edge. Of a larger piece. Sorry about that, I dropped glue on my carpet. That's not good. So again, with the same mixture of glue that I glued the pages with, I'm just going to put glue on the back of this little piece. And attach it right at the top edge. And then when it's time to be finishing up the book, I can decide where I want this little pocket to go. And this cute little pocket with a poem tucked into it would be a nice addition. And I'm just going to trim off. I'm not sure how wide the finished piece will be, but we know we want the edge of the pocket to extend the entire length of the pocket. So before you clean up and throw away all these little scraps, make sure you don't have a use for them. So you can start by getting your pockets ready, or just anything that's a fairly good size, put it aside. Little bits that you know you can't use for anything else can go right into the garbage, but save the bigger bits. You may need them. Sometimes your book has too many pages, and there are some really clever, creative ways that you can get rid of pages, and I'm going to show you. You don't want to just rip them out because that destabilizes the book. So let's say that these 2 pages, I really want the kids in the gym class. I don't want those 2 pages. I'm running out of fancy paper, so what do I do? Well, I'm going to take this top page and I'm going to go to the edge of the picture and slowly tear out the section, or tear off the section that's beyond the picture I want. And it's going to leave this little ruffly edge, which I want. I'm now going to go in and glue those 2 pages together. because I do not need both pages. I'm running out of fancy paper, and so I just want to get rid of a few of these pages. So one way I can do it is just make a nice rough edge, tear, glue this page to the one right next to it. So now I've taken 2 pages and turned them into one. And because I don't even need this section, I'm then going to tear a little bit further away, trying to follow the same winding path. So now I have sort of a preview of what's on this page, and these 2 pages are now one. Another way to do it, which is sort of a fun way, is to take a page, and I like the Singers. I don't necessarily like that, but I'll deal with that later. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a window in the page. And so I'm going to need a ruler and my pencil. And I'm going to measure down. Now again, I'm going to leave that picture because I like the chorus. And I'm going to go down about 2 centimeters and make a line down to about 9. Skip 2 centimeters and go down to the edge, to the centimeters down there. So it's about 2 centimeters, a little bit of space. Now I'm going to go across. And I don't want to get too close to the edge, because if I get too close to the edge, it's going to weaken the page. But I want to just draw rectangles. They don't have to be perfect. The lines don't have to be perfect, because you can go back and cover up anything that you don't like later. And so now I'm going to make my, when you see the pencil line went over, we're not worried about that. So then I'm going to do 1 page at a time. Slightly bend it back and snip in the center. And now I'm going to cut out that section. This you have to do carefully, because you don't want to damage the book, and you don't want to make the hole too big. And I tend to move the book around to make it easier to cut. I don't want to keep it straight. And I'm only cutting through 1 page. Now, if I had something beautiful on the next page, I could leave the window only in this 1 page, but that's not the way I want to do it, because I don't really have anything all that beautiful back there. So once I get this top page cut, I'm going to use the holes to trace where I'm going to cut the next page. So this is going to go through 2 pages. And it might be a little harder with pencil. It might be a little harder to see. So if I had one, which I just happen to have one, I might go to a Sharpie marker or a pen. If the pages were both the same color and they were white and a pencil would show up beautifully, I would just use the pencil. But now I'm tracing the hole I just cut, because I want the same size hole on the next page. And then once again, you snip it. Oops, sorry, I'm bouncing the camera. And then you're going to trim those as well. Once I have the windows cut out, I need to decide, do I want them to just stay open, or would I like them to have sort of a window pane? Now there are a few things you could use. This is clear cellophane from a package of greeting cards. That would work. I have a beautiful vellum that was part of a brochure that would make a nice window pane. I also have parchment paper. So if you're baking, it's sort of a translucent, the light goes through it. I think I'm going to use the parchment paper. I think that will work best. So what I need to do is glue around my holes. Don't get it in the hole. You don't want it to go onto the next page. So you're going to glue around the holes. You're going to lay your parchment paper down. And I don't want it to cover, I don't want it to go all the way to the end, because I want to be able to glue the whole thing together and sandwich this parchment paper right in the middle. So I'm going to trim it down so it fits over my windows, but it doesn't go all the way to the edge of the page. And I do want it to overlap a little because I want it to be secure. So I'm going to tape that down. It's not going to stick very well. The cool thing about parchment paper, and what we use it in the kitchen for, is it stops cookies from sticking to the pan. So it's definitely slippery. It's not going to want to hold on to the page. That's why we don't want it to be too big, because we're going to use this page to hold it in place. So once it's down, you're going to go back and finish gluing this page. And we're going to glue these two pages together just like we did in the other section. But this time when we're done, we're going to have a cool little window that goes right through to the page behind. Now, do you have to do any of this? Of course not. It just makes your book a little more interesting, a little more fun, and I know so many of you are super, crafty, talented kids, and so having a little bit of an art project is not going to be a problem. You're going to have fun with it. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to be able to see that when the book is done, but that's okay. I'm not worried about it. So get the glue down, and then carefully slide this down so that it makes as much contact as possible. It's as smooth as possible. Those two pages stick together and start to act like one page. You don't want to rip your parchment paper. And again, we're going to close the book and let it dry, but I want to give you a little bit of a preview. You will have, you'll be able to see light through your page. And it's kind of a cool way of getting rid of an extra page and adding an extra feature in your book. I will come back. I know I definitely do not want these words. So I'm going to take one of the pieces of paper that I've already prepared, and I'm going to go over top of it, over top of those words. So I'll have my pocket done and a place to put a poem done when it's dry. And I need to go print out my poems so I can show you how to put your poems in your book, but right now my printer and my computer are not playing nice. I'm going to leave a little bit of the words showing, but now this green rectangle becomes a space to put a poem near the cool translucent windows. And you've gotten rid of an extra page in your book that you didn't need. I was thinking about just putting everything away, letting it dry overnight. And I went back for a last look and I thought, wow, that would be a great place to put a pocket. So I want to show you how to put a pocket. You need to be able to get into the top. So you're not going to glue the whole thing down. That won't work. So what you're going to do is you're going to glue along the edge Again, that was, you don't want too much glue, but you need a little bit more because you do want it to seal. You do want it to be secure so that you can slide things in and out without damaging the pocket. Now, I didn't measure first, so I'm not exactly sure how long my pocket has to be. So I'm going to glue the sides, and then instead of gluing a bottom, I'm just going to glue the bottom of the page. Not the whole page, but just the part underneath this yellow section, the vocabulary, that I want to hide. Don't go too high, because when you do that, you're limiting how deep your pocket is. So I've got glue on the sides of the pocket, I've got glue on the bottom of the page, and I'm going to line it up so that it's even with the picture. I'm going to slide my fingers down to make sure it's got a nice seal. This is one time I'm going to cut it off before it has a chance to dry, because I have extra glue. And so I need to make sure that that extra glue doesn't get all over the place. So again, using the page as a guide, I'm just going to cut off the bottom part of this pocket, which I don't need, but I'm not going to throw it away because it's a nice big piece. And then I have saved the picture of the kids in band and created a pocket at the same time. And it's a nice idea to take a one last look through your book before you let it dry overnight to see if there's anything else that you can add right away before the drying time starts. And I really don't think there's anything else I want to do right now. I think I'm at a point where there are more pages to cover, there's more I need to put in, but right now I'm probably at a really good place where I could stop. And this on the back of the window page, I decided I didn't like that, so I just covered it with some fancy paper. I'm not 100% sure I like the way that looks, but we'll see. These were the two. Was it these two that I glued together? No. There are still some extra spots where I can either put another pocket, or I can do another tear, or I can cover them with fancy paper. Normally when we do these books, we find picture books that have about 25 pages. This is a really long book to use for a poetry book, so it gives us a lot of opportunities to get rid of extra pages. Okay, and now we will let it dry overnight and be ready to begin tomorrow. Now that I'm done cutting out all of my poetry, I've organized it into piles of poems that are about the similar size, about the same size. And that'll just make it easier as I'm putting together the poems with the little scraps of paper that are going to be their frames. If I know what size I need ahead of time, it makes life easier. And then I'm going to coordinate somewhat the colors. So I have this really nice book poem, a book jacket poem, and I had, like I said, I had a color printer, so it came out in color, which is nice. I'm going to glue it on. And I think this particular color green frame really complements the colors of the books. So I'm going to try to get them. It's a smaller piece, slightly skinnier, so it's going to be a little bit skinnier frame. But get it centered on there. And then go back and trim off the extra that I don't need. Try to make it even, so this side and this side are about the same. I have another book poem which has similar colors, and I'm going to do that on the other half of that, or the other piece of that. Always with that diluted glue, make sure you get to the edge, but don't put it on there gloppy and thick, or it will definitely make your paper get all wrinkly, and we don't want that. We want it to stay as flat as possible. And it's a little bit annoying because it is going to want to curl, and it is going to be a little bit tricky to get it centered. Do your best. you're going to notice that this piece is not as centered. I have a little more on the top than on the bottom. And since the bottom is my skinniest, I'm now just going to trim the rest of it to match the bottom. So I will just trim the sides a little bit tighter. I'll trim so that every one of the sides is a similar width. Once you put it in the book, you're really not going to notice if there are tiny variations, but you don't want it to be too different. Like if this were 1/2 inch, it would be really noticeable. So that's not what we're going to do. Okay, and we're just going to work our way through and find bits of paper and poems that are about the right size. And then we'll do final trimming to make sure everything is neat and orderly in the way we want it to be. Depending on how much time you put in, how fussy you are, you can carefully coordinate the poem frame to the page that you want to put it on. I'm not really all that worried about it right now. I'm just going to put everything in the book the way it is. The teacher book that I showed you earlier in the year as a model, I was much fussier with that one. And as you get each poem settled on its little frame, you just trim it so that it is nice and even. If you want to, you can do a double frame. Sometimes that's pretty cool. So if I had another piece of paper and it's a little bit bigger, I can glue it on the green and then come back and glue it onto this beige, and then depending on what background page I put it on, it'll really pop out because it has a double frame. Try to get it as even as possible. That saves your trimming. Then go back, trim. Sorry, I'm cutting off the screen again. So now we have a double frame. We have the poem and a green piece of paper, and then a beige piece of paper underneath it. And as you get your poems ready to go into the book, you're just going to make a pile of the ones that are finished. Next step is you're going to put the poems into the book. I've gotten them all framed and I've decided what pages they're going to go on to speed this up a little bit, but that is one of the steps. You need to go through your book and decide where you're going to put things. And it's usually based on size, color, shape. It's up to you how you do it. And then you're going to, once again, thinned down glue. I like to put them in a certain way. I don't want to just stick them anywhere, so I will often lay them out on the page stair step, or this one actually has a bigger frame, so I'll put that one in the middle. You could put stair step, you could put them one above the other. You just have to decide what you would like, how you would like your book to look. You have to do a lot of the deciding ahead of time, because once you've glued things down, if you try to take the book back apart, you end up ripping the pages and you end up ripping the paper. So trying to fix something gets a little problematic, and you're better off to decide how you want things done before you start really gluing things down. And so I tried a few different layouts and decided this is what I wanted. And so this page, and now you have to make sure when you're gluing, all the excess glue gets wiped up. If you leave extra glue along the edges and you close your book to dry it, you have now glued the pages together. So if you got a lot of little sloppy, like I just did, you want to make sure the extra glue, and you're going to notice that they're all sort of bending up. But once you carefully close the page and then let it dry overnight, everything will flatten out again. So I put that one over here. And I'm thinking this one with a double border will look really nice on this green background. The one above it also with a dark green background. I try to put poems either where the meaning is similar can go together. Another way to do it is the way I've framed them to make it look a little more coordinated artistically. It truly doesn't matter. It's your book. And these I will put right down the center. Being careful to put enough glue, not too much glue. Any slops or spills or overflow has to be wiped up with a paper towel so that you do not end up gluing the book shut. That's one of the big problems kids have with this last step. If you get a little bit sloppy with the glue, which happens, it's no problem. Just make sure you wipe the extra glue off, otherwise you will glue your book shut. And so then you just work your way through. Oh, that actually would have been nicer over there. I can actually move that because it hasn't dried yet. Once it's dried, you really can't move it. But if it's still wet and it's bigger than the one I took out of there, see there's still glue down there, but this is actually a bigger poem. So it'll fit right over top. You won't even notice. I like that a little bit better. And that's basically the way it goes. You're going to be making decisions, and I'm thinking this pocket, I'm going to put a poem over top of the pocket, and then I can put a poem in the pocket as well. So then you work your way through, and you'll notice I have a lot of poems laid out, so I'm just going to go back and glue them in place. Before I put the book away for the night to dry, I want to check and see if there are any places that I'm really not happy with, because I created pockets to put poems in and never use them. And I want to show you one of the great things that you can do with a pocket. If you go back and you have a page you do not like, and this Barnes & Noble page I do not like. It didn't dry nicely. It's very wobbly. It's bumpy. So I'm going to take a pocket that coordinates with the page over here, and I'm going to put it over the entire lower portion of that page. You're still going to see a little bit of the wobbliness. I can't get rid of all of it, but I can get rid of a lot of it. So in this case, I actually trimmed the pocket ahead of time. So I'm going to go along the sides, and I'm putting a lot of glue, but I'm going to wipe the extra off. I'm going along the sides, and I'm going along the bottom, not the top, because I want to be able to put things in here. So you see how I've got glue along the sides and the bottom, not the top. I want it to be open. Then I'm going to go back onto this page and look at the way it's laid out. And I noticed right here, it's hard for you to see, but is the word education. And I want to keep that. So I'm going to put my pocket right below the word education. And I noticed that while I was playing with it, I knocked a little piece of my decoration here. I knocked it, so I'm going to put more glue, close that down. If I got a little sloppy, I'm going to wipe it up. That's what happens when you try to rush a little bit. You'll get a little bit sloppy with your glue, and you have to be careful that you don't do that. But, you know, even teachers rush. So now I'm going to go through. I had a couple more pockets. This was another page where I wasn't really all that thrilled with the way it turned out. And I don't have anything else that I want to put at the bottom. So again, I'm going to just cover a pocket. Now the poems that can go in the pockets, they would be things like my blackout poetry, if I wanted to put that in there separately. If I wanted to put my magazine poetry, where I cut the pieces out of magazines, that's on paper that's much too large to fit in this poetry book. So that would also be something that I could slide into the pocket. And I think that was it. I think I decided to put 2 pockets in here, 2 more. I had one in the beginning. There we go. And you'll notice as I go through, I'm still not done. There are pages that haven't done anything with it all. That's perfectly fine. Even when I am finished with this unit, there may be pages that are left blank. There may be pages that are not done, which is perfectly fine. It gives me an opportunity to go back in the future if I ever think of another poem that would work, if I ever think of another decoration technique style that I would like to use, I can always go back to this book. So it does not have to be completely finished this year.